I've got three stories for you this week, and I don't know where to start. Well, let's start with one that you might have not heard of. Okay, a US government outlet sued by its own journalists. Why? For running propaganda. Foreign military posting memes to American IG, X accounts, and so on. Number two. And um, that's the one that got to me the most, I guess. Government agencies who use social media to like look like they're extremist accounts. Let's just say it how it is. Government agencies posting stuff that would usually get flagged by researchers that are looking into like what counts as extremist content. Three different stories related, the same playbook. Let's talk about it. Sawadee and welcome to another episode here for the Funky Pod Mindful Media and Communication. And my intro today is a little more mellow than usual, I guess, because let's be honest, we're talking about war again and politics. And I know it's not a politics podcast, and I don't want it to be one either, to be honest. And I just try to record the podcast outside on my balcony actually to at least sit between some plants and be more chill about it. But it got too hot and my camera shut off because it was so hot outside here in Bangkok. Crazy, crazy times right now, heading into the Thai New Year soon. But that's unfortunately not what we're talking about. We're talking about war and what is it good for? Absolutely lots of clicks, unfortunately. And the thing is, right, I mentioned in the intro that like propaganda. And so sued because of propaganda. And I know I'm like, summarizing it quite simply for the sake of talking about it right now. So stick with me. I'll explain it in more detail as we move through. Okay. But if we think about propaganda, we think about, my history, Germany, right? World War II, that's what you usually hear about propaganda. That's what the Germans did in World War II. And that's what they did. And that's why we're thinking it's been like almost 100 years ago now. We're not falling for that anymore. Propaganda doesn't work anymore, right? But propaganda these days might not, fall into how we would have defined propaganda as per textbook, but it still has a similar effect. And I try to explain. Because usually what we think of propaganda was like they're trying to change your mind by broadcasting the same message over and over and over again, and eventually your mind succumbs and you're like, yeah, cool, sure, yes, I believe what I'm hearing all the time. Yeah, like a message with an argument or this one single point that this message wants you to accept. But what's happening in 2026 is a little bit different. So it's not propaganda as in the old days, because it's not about arguments. It's about the environment in which communication happens. So the goal is not to convince you of X, like X as the point, not the platform that you're hopefully not on anymore. The goal is to make X, the point, XYZ, look normal. Make it look like the baseline. Okay. And in communication, we call it normalization. So once something is accepted as a baseline, as normal, we don't question it anymore. So now think about how this happens right now. Yeah, war, right? Bombing the bad guys, kidnapping foreign dictators and whatnot. If this is the baseline, the government doesn't really care whether or not you're for them or against them. It's just like, that's what we talk about now. I don't want to convince you that it was good. I want to convince you that it's normal. That's nothing crazy. Okay, so that's normalization. More in the next few minutes. So those three different stories I mentioned in the beginning, they use three different methods. That's all related to what I just explained. Yeah, this the same underlying logic, so to speak. And so this episode today is about this playbook, this underlying logic. So let's jump into it, right? the extremist aesthetic. And that's how I call like the first segment here when I was taking notes. Because like I said in the beginning, researchers who track extremist content on different platforms, they have been flagging something very interesting. For example, at DHS, social media uses the same visual and rhetorical grammar as extremist movements. Yeah, I'm stopping on purpose because just think about it, okay? They use the same high contrast imagery, right? The same aggressive typography, dehumanizing framing, this us and them kind of construction, right? So normalizing hating on certain people, and while doing so, of course, appealing to an extremist group as well. And that leads us to a theory we talk about a lot here, framing theory. You remember Erving Goffman, right? So frames don't tell you what to think, but they tell you what the stakes are within the frame. So if you can put a frame around certain happenings, yeah, then you can make the people look at this frame. Don't look outside of the frame. Look, that's the frame. Look inside here or think inside here. Okay. So frames tell you what the stakes are, who the players are, who are the good guys, the bad guys, what counts as a threat, who are illegal aliens, who are undocumented people, and so on. They label things as well, right? So the frame kind of determines the moral weight of what we talk about inside the frame. Okay, back to that visual part that I mentioned, right? The visual rhetoric. So stylistic choices, when you present something, they carry weight. They carry meaning. We talked about this on this podcast before as well, right? We talked about signifiers and so on. So visual elements carry weight. So with visual elements, it's like that. I don't even have to say something because you can see it. So it implies lots of meaning already. For example, right now, didn't prepare it, but right now I'm wearing a shirt with the Thai Football Association logo on here, right? So the Thai football team, which implies that I'm supporting the Thai football team, which to some extent, of course, I live in Thailand. I am, of course. So yeah, I don't have to point that out. So that's basically a very low-key example of using visual aesthetics to make a point. So now if government agencies post on social media using certain visual choices, aesthetics, they carry meaning without words. The audience for this extremist content recognizes that it's like, hey, that's the stuff we usually share on 4chan or wherever, right? Wow, they're doing it now. So they respond to it. So even without being able to articulate why exactly, it appeals to this extremist audience without me having to say, hey, yo, extremists, listen to me. I would like your support. I don't have to say it, because if I would say it, I would get criticized, right, from the mainstream. So I don't have to say it. A smart move? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark, shrugging shoulders. Another theory that fits to that, by the way, you might have heard of it, the Overton window, right? So after Joseph Overton. So the Overton window is like and I quote, the range of ideas considered acceptable at any given moment. Yeah, so that shifts through language, through visual representation, and so on. So explaining also in a second. So when official government channels, communication adopts extremist aesthetics, typography, and so on, two things happen, okay? At the same time. First, it activates an audience that holds those extreme positions already, because they're like, hey, we feel seen right now, okay? Number one. Number two, that window that I just explained, the Overton window, it moves this window so that the extreme starts to look normal. It looks like the center. And so you move that Overton window, and now you take it from the extreme, either side, by the way, you take it from the extreme and move it to the center. And then, back to what I said earlier, you're trying to normalize it by doing that. And once it's normal, the audience doesn't question it anymore. Now that's our baseline. And that's how you move extremism into the mainstream, into being normal. Okay. Got a few examples for you from history. And since I got some messages from American listeners, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Keep it coming. Really cool. I try to find American examples. For next time I bring German again. I'll bring Thai examples, of course. But since I was about to say criticizing, since today's episode about war and stuff is very US, not only adjacent, but what's the right word for not just around, but actually right through this? Very US heavy, of course. I think in American examples make sense. So I got two for you. One is Richard Nixon, Nixon's law and order rhetoric back then in the 60s. In communication, we analyzed it a lot because it borrowed from segregationist language. All right. So it just got repackaged for the mainstream. So he didn't have to say that he's racist, but this emotional resonance of like this fringe position without actually endorsing the fringe. So just appealing to it without endorsing, without actually saying it, but just using similar wording so that those fringe people in those fringe positions would know, hey, he's one of us. Yeah, so that was one of the things. Another thing we learn in comms is comms classes is the Reagan era, like the welfare rhetoric. He talked about the welfare queens back then. Yeah, so borrow some existing racist framework while still maintaining deniability because not calling anyone out in particular, but using again similar wording to indicate I know what's happening and I'm with you people. Yeah, so now of course you can argue is it intentional or not, right? So but whether or not it's intentional, the effect is the same. Official communication is now visually indistinguishable from content that 5 years ago, 2 years ago, would have been flagged as fringe. Yet the intention does not change what it does. So if someone says, don't be such a snowflake, it's just fun, and I'm sharing polymarket memes because it's funny, even so I'm the minister of the of war, for example. Yeah, haha, funny. I might also think that the polymarket post was funny, even though polymarket is the devil. I have an episode on that as well. But that doesn't change it. If you, as the Minister of War, uh, do that, then that carries weight. And it doesn't matter if you actually think it, if it's just a joke or whatnot. Okay. And definitely not a joking matter. If you go to now the second part, right? I mentioned earlier the Voice of America part. So I found this interesting from maybe a professional point of view, but also just to see like how we moved through different stages of what outlets experience. And I have to read this for a second because I took some notes for you, okay? Because I didn't know that. I didn't know that Voice of America was founded in 1942, for example. Like, and the explicit mandate was objective journalism to audiences living under authoritarian regimes. It was built to counter Radio Moscow. Again, Elon Musk meme right here. Let that sink in. And the argument at its founding was, and I quote again, we broadcast the truth, including about ourselves. That credibility is what makes us believable to audiences who live inside propaganda. Sounds good, right? That's what journalism should be, used to be. And now, VOA journalists filed a lawsuit alleging the outlet is now running White House talking points, suppressing inconvenient stories. And they installed Ms. Lake to run it. This brings me to hey, because still a prof at heart. I mean, and by profession. So, agenda setting theory. Next theory here in the podcast, we talked about this many a times. Shows us clearly what's happening. One more time, the media does not tell us exactly what to think, because if someone would be like, think this, you're like, no, I have free will. I'm not thinking this, right? But it tells us one more time, similar to the frame, what to think about. If VOA suppresses stories, it isn't lying, right? It's just not talking about it. It's kind of just deciding what's real, what's important. So now audiences that are receiving the VOA broadcasts have no way of knowing what's been omitted. Because how would I know? Yeah, so they receive a version of American reality with certain things quietly being removed. Let's not talk about it. So it's basically now a public versus state broadcaster, right? The distinction is, should be, used to be editorial independence. Who controls the editorial line is the question. Yet the lines maintained by convention, institutional culture, legal structure. But when those weaken, then the lines move, the lines become more blurry. And I got examples, of course. I got receipts. And before you're saying, oh, you're so old with your examples, hey, it's a historical example. I'm not that old, but I read about it because I studied history. I learned about history. Cold War. Think back to the Cold War, okay? We had Radio Free Europe, and it lost all credibility when its CIA funding was disclosed in the 70s. Remember that? Read about that? Probably not remembering, but did you read about that? Yeah, that was like a big deal back then, and it's still like in uni textbooks and so on. Because the value was perceived as independence. You're independent, that's why you're valuable. The moment that perception broke, so did the instrument. Then don't want it anymore. So the irony that's running through all of this is the techniques that are being applied to VOA in 2026 are the same techniques VOA was built to expose. Isn't that ironic? Don't you think? A little too ironic. Yeah, I really do think. So, VOA's power was never the US government's power, right? It was the audience believed that this was something different. And once the belief is gone, you don't have a propaganda tool anymore. You just have another channel that nobody trusts. So good job breaking that channel. And now the third story, the last thing that I promised for this episode. War, what is it good for? Absolutely, as I mentioned, all the clicks and memes, of course. So, US and Iran, an active, do we call it a war by now? We do, but does he? Active escalation. And Iran's military communication, right, posts memes en masse in English, formatted style for X and IG and everything. And of course, it targets American audiences. So it's what we're seeing right now is like a nation state in a geopolitical conflict using memes as a military communication tool. So we are at information warfare at, I don't know, squared or like the next level or like the lower level. I don't know what you want to call it. But both sides, I hate this narrative, both sides, they fight for the narrative as much as for the territory on the ground, right? What's changed is the channels, the formats, and those things. But back in the day, Dawkins talked about the meme, right? In the late 70s, early 80s, I believe. And he said memes, and again, wrote it down for you so that I'm not making up with my German English mix, whatever I do here. Units of cultural transmission that spread peer to peer. Key property, horizontal, not top down, no visible center. That's how he defined it in 76. So traditional propaganda, back to where we started, is visibly institutionalized, sent from the top down, right? You identify the sender and then you discount the message. Yeah, of course they say that they want us to think like that. Yeah, a meme looks like organic content from someone in your network. So you're not saying, yeah, of course they say that, because it looks like it's some normal person that pops up organically in your feed. So when Iran's military posts a meme and Americans reshare it, the Iranians' military message is delivered, but by American voices. Yeah. So the sender-reviewer distinction collapses completely. So when we think about it, right, and think about back to the example I gave you earlier, the Cold War, right? Like we had like what was a thing like the Cold War diplomacy. Yeah, again, studied in history/communication studies, and they had like jazz tours, Hollywood exports, Voice of America, a slow, expensive, traceable. It did work, right? Of course, but it was slow and traceable and very expensive. A meme, what does a meme cost? Nothing. Spreads in hours, and the origin, it can be hidden. Like, how do you know who originally posted it? Yeah, IRA communications. So also bring you something from my neck of the woods in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, non-state actor using media as a battlefield because it couldn't win militarily. Of course not. So nation states are now doing the same thing in 2026 with those media tools, with media as a tool. And the thing is, right now, you can't tell a government meme from an organic one. That's by design. So when you reshare something that makes you laugh about a political situation, you might just be a node in an information warfare campaign. Maybe Polymarket is just, an actual state actor. The question is not whether to stop sharing things, though, because that's not a solution, of course. It's whether to maybe just occasionally ask, who made this and why is it so shareable? Wrapping things up, okay? So the pattern that we now seen with like three different actors, domestic agency, captured institution, foreign military. Three different methods. Aesthetic mimicry, editorial like supervision or suppression, viral format hijacking. However, it's all the same logic underneath. Don't argue with the environment. Become the environment. Okay, that's the logic. So classic propaganda, 20th century model, needed a message and an audience. Sender, message, receiver, take it, take it, take it, take it, take it, take it. Right? That was the propaganda. It was transmission. You could super easily identify it, and you could critique it, maybe counter it if you're in a somewhat free society, but you could still ignore it if as long as possible. What's described in all those three stories I just shared with you requires no transmission. It operates by, let's say, by osmosis. Okay, it changes what looks normal, normalization, and what looks official. It moves the window, moves the frames, and what it also changes it, what looks like just like something what people are saying doesn't look like official governmental communication. And that leads us back, and I'm almost done, but I have to mention one more time. Sean Baudrillard, you say it now, say it with me. Thank you. Hyperreality. The image eventually replaces the thing it represents. And that's where we're at. We're watching that happen in real time right now. And not with images of events, but with the image of what political communication is supposed to look like. Once the fake version, the hyperreal version of a thing is indistinguishable from the real version, the fake version wins. Not because it's convinced anyone, but because it became the reference point. It became normal, the baseline. So now here's the thing about an environment. You don't argue with it. You breathe it. You don't evaluate the air, right? You just take it in. So that's what all three of those stories have in common. They're not trying to change your mind, they're trying to change the air. So the media literacy question that I ask on this podcast all the time, right? And it used to be this: is this true? What I'm looking at, is this true? But now it's something harder. It's like, what is this making normal? Those are completely different questions. And the second one, I think that's the one worth practicing. Let me know what you think. Shout out in the comments at FunGetPod on social media. How do you feel about all of that? Share your thoughts, because I have so many of those in my head and I need someone to talk to. So let it all out at FunGetPod on social media. Until then, subscribe for more. It makes my cat happy too that you can just hear complaining in the background. Who needs some snacks right now, right? Until then, stay safe, take care. We talk soon. Sorry, Cup. Yeah, you're getting snacks. Good, yeah, good job.